So welcome everyone. So we continue with the unruly natures actually, because this research is also part of that project. So let's just dive right into it. Let's see if this pointer works. So actually this study that I'm going to talk about, it's the first part of the Unruly Natures project. We did it as a bit of exploratory study that focuses on human side of the human-baboon conflict. And we really wanted to unpack the subjective perceptions and lived realities of those communities and identify the existing tensions between different perspectives, but also where the areas of consensus are, potentially, and also just to understand better the underlying assumptions and values that drives those different perspectives that exist out there. So yeah, the key questions that we were exploring with this project was basically what are the key viewpoints that we can identify in the baboon discourse and what values define those. And so just for transparency, I give you a little bit of a quick background around methodology and how we did that. So first of all, we looked at 7 different areas in Cape Town. All of those areas were under Urban Baboon Management Program at the time and were visited by 5 different troops. Those areas were rather highly or frequently visited and quite highly polarized when it comes to people's opinions. And we strategically selected residents based on their knowledge and the views, and also did some snowballing, and we talked to 26 residents. And the method I used was Q method. That method comes from psychology and is designed to study subjectivity in a more systematic way. So I will just very quickly walk you through some steps, just so you know how it works. So the first step is, as researchers, we're trying to understand what is the full story out there with all its complexities. So you kind of you try to use different sources, gray literature, scientific literature, videos, social media, to understand, what's going on out there. And so I collected like 560 statements that described this discourse. And then, but obviously people cannot engage with 560 statements. That would be impossible. So you have to choose the statements you're going to show to your participants. So I chose 52 statements that represented the complexity of the debate, but where it was more tangible for people to engage with that. And then what they do, they read the statements and they rate how much they agree or disagree with certain statement, and that's your data. You're also doing follow-up interviews after that to understand the reasons behind their decisions. And then with all of that, you basically interpret and analyze and try to come with some sort of holistic story of what is going on. So let me share with you some of the results. I just want to make a disclaimer here as well that this is a fracture of results. You're not going to see all 52 statements because it will be very difficult for you to process all of that at this point. So these are the points that define each perspective most, so they were more significant. So we actually, like Johan was talking about polarization, and in fact we did find those 2 major perspectives in the discourse around baboons. I call them learning to live with baboons and learning to effectively control and manage baboons. And so learning to live with baboons focuses on people's responsibility. So it says we need to take more responsibility for our behavior. It also says that we need to account for people's experiences and lived realities when we're making decisions instead of just relying on scientific facts. And that relates back to what Johan said as well, that we can't really ignore people's subjectivity because they do make decisions based on that as well, not just on facts. That perspective also says that we need to build more tolerance towards baboons, and it comes with that deep assumptions that society and nature are connected, and we can't just try to forcefully separate those 2. Learning to effectively control and manage baboons paints a slightly different picture. They basically say, first and foremost, we have to separate people and baboons. So we need to make sure that we keep baboons out of urban spaces. And to do that, we need to use evidence-based decision-making. So that perspective actually, there is a contrast, as we can see, between the first perspective that says, well, we need more than just evidence, versus the other one saying we need just the evidence. Actually, the second perspective sees emotions as ill-suited to make decisions. So they say, no, we need to rely on scientific facts. In general, that perspective also speaks about fear as one of the tools to restore that natural separation between people and baboons. So they say we need to actually make baboons afraid of humans again. And in general, that perspective sees that idea of coexistence as naive. They basically say, no, people and baboons do not work well in the same space. But even though there are quite a different positions, there were still points of consensus. And actually, there were more than I expected. I'm only showing you 3 that were the most significant. But first was, we need to stop using abusive language towards baboons such as pests and vermin, because this kind of language kind of increases this moral disengagement from these animals, and then it can make us more prone to illegal actions such as killing or poisoning. We need to recognize context and value differences, and one of the agreement was also that we need to build more collaboration to mitigate the conflict across scales, but also vertically amongst different communities. But I also said that I wanted to explore what drives those different perspectives, and I just want to maybe tell you a little bit more why it's important to do that. And also, when I talk about values now, I'm talking about the held personal values. And these are, different conceptions of what is desirable, which ultimately guides people's actions. So we are talking here about, values that serve this motivational purpose to help uncover the moral and emotional foundation of human nature interactions, not the act of valuing something. So making that explicit judgment. So these 2 perspectives, actually, the underlying value systems are quite different. Learning to live with baboons focuses on universalism and benevolence, and these centers around, appreciation for nature, equity, and responsibility. Whether learning to effectively control and manage baboons focuses on things like tradition, power, and security. And tradition here, it talks about respect and commitment to traditions and customs and avoidance of extreme feelings, which kind of aligns nicely with their idea that emotions are ill-suited to make decisions. Power talks about, control, dominance over people, nature, and resources. And security speaks to stable and safe and harmonious relationships in society. And so I just want to bring some quotes from participants to illustrate how that manifested itself in the interviews. So universalism talks about, for example, it's not our choice to decide when the baboon should be killed. It's not our choice to decide for wildlife. That speaks to, that idea of equity and animals having rights as well as humans. Benevolence talks, about the responsibility. We need people to start taking responsibility, and we need a baboon management program to start officially recognizing people as the cause of the problem. And then when it comes to the other perspective, tradition manifested itself, for example, around that emotionality. So we can't be emotional and make decisions. Conservation is not a pretty thing. If there's a baboon without teeth, as they are all rotten, he needs to be euthanized. We cannot call people murderers, they're just doing their job. So here is that avoidance of extreme emotion and this kind of voice of reason. Power manifested itself, for example, with this quote saying, if we use fences, then people could decide when they want to be exposed to baboons by simply going to baboon area. So you can see that there's this division between people's area and baboons area. And if we put this fence, then we have the power and we have the agency to decide. So that's quite an interesting one. I like that one. Is laughing there. And security, talks about that feeling of safety and fear is a real emotion that people experience. So this one says we need them to be out of urban areas because they're causing fear in people who experience some negative encounters, and people don't want to tolerate this. They don't want to be afraid and live in prison. And that's a very common narrative as well. So what does it mean? Just a few implications for management and how we can think about this a little bit more pragmatically and practically. Well, so conservation is one of those problems which require us to gain tools and capacities to navigate differences, because like we said, it's very difficult to find one objective truth. There is a lot of perceptions and subjective perception and experiences that feeds into our decision making. And so trying to convince people that this is the best solution, it's somewhat difficult. So we might actually, maybe we need to find different approach now to this type of problems. Understanding people's priorities and assumptions can help us navigate these tensions and anticipate responses to different strategies. And we do see in somewhat a failure in doing that currently in Cape Town, when the authorities are trying to navigate the situation and trying to come up with the new solutions, but without really necessarily taking into account how people feel about those different ideas. And then they are basically met with resistance. And then in speaking to that, I feel like careful preparation of those engagement processes sensitive to value differences is crucial for more productive deliberation and establishment of trust that we've been talking about, to avoid that resistance, to move forward instead of being stuck in that unsustainable situation. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention. And we just recently published this paper, so you can scan the QR code if you want to learn more.